Okay, so I've had this titanium MIG140 welder for quite a while now, and I haven't made a single video on it. I can't remember how long ago it was, but I had stopped in to Harbor Freight, and they had this deal where pretty much all Harbor Freights, I think, have like a clearance section or an as-is section where if you buy something from Harbor Freight and it has an issue or you want to return it for whatever reason, usually Harbor Freight, if it's like not good enough to sell on shelves, they'll have an area where they have all this stuff that's discounted. My store one day had all this discounted stuff, but they added 40% off on top of it. So that's what this was. Now, unfortunately, the sticker was ripped off already. There was an orange sticker that was on this. And you know what? I kind of forget what it was. I think that it was marked down to like $389.99, so like $390, and then there's 40% off. And I just remember that I bought this, all this stuff you see right here, I bought for like $215, give or take, and then there's tax on there. But anyway, I got this whole like welder set up here for a little over 200 bucks. Like I said, this is a titanium MIG140. I can't really remember how much this model was brand new. I think it was at least $4.99 or $5.99. It was somewhere in there. I still cannot figure out why somebody returned it to Harbor Freight. I know while it was in store, the MIG gun was wrapped up and it was underneath of this cover, and it was around where your spool goes. I think a lot of people might actually buy these and not realize that. So then when they open their box, they think that, the MIG gun's missing. And if you look for a MIG gun / cord to put a new MIG gun on one of these, it is actually kind of expensive, even used on eBay. So maybe that's why it was returned. I don't know, but it was in there. So I always look inside of these welders when I'm at Harbor Freight, even if they're in like a box. In the as-is section, I'll cut the box open and look at it. I actually did that with the MIG170 once. But anyway, so the MIG gun was in there. There is some cosmetic crap on here, like there's a little ding right there. And it might be hard to see, but there's a dent right here. But anyway, I really don't know the reason why this was returned. But either way, I bought it. I have not welded with it yet, but when you turn it on, everything, it seems to be, it does its startup process like normal, and there's no error codes, there's no like alarm light or anything. So I'm not really sure, what's going on there. This welder does happen to be an actual MIG welder where you can have cover gas. So it came with the regulator that you hook into your tank, and that threads into the back of the unit here. I don't have a tank yet. I kind of want to try this out first before I go leasing a tank or buying a tank or whatever. So I'm actually just going to run Flux core through this thing. I've had a lot of success with my Flux core welders, and one of the reasons I always kind of chose Flux core over standard MIG is that I don't like dealing with gas. I think it's just more crap to worry about. You have to deal with your regulator, you got to adjust it, and then you got to get your gas filled. And then anyway, aside from the tank ownership, it's just another expense. And so I never really liked using cover gas. And Flux core is just nice, because it's cheaper running just Flux core wire. It's a little dirty, but you don't have to deal with gas. And I'm not like a huge fabricator. I don't really do anything that's too huge. Nothing Flux core can't handle, but since this thing was so cheap, I just had to get it. Make sure all the settings are good and all that, and then I'm gonna do some welding with it. I'm actually gonna take this off. I will say this thing really does have a much heavier duty feeling MIG gun than any of the Flux core welders I have. Okay, so going back to the thing about Flux core and then MIG, standard MIG. I need to look into the voltage feel, because I believe you change polarity between flux core and standard MIG, but I gotta read up and make sure. That's something I'm not sure right at this moment, so I'll definitely look that up and make any adjustments that I need to before trying to weld anything with this. I have a gazillion stores that sell this gasless flux cord wire in 030, and every store varies in price, but buy it online. You can get it extremely cheap online. It's only like 10 or 15 bucks online, free delivery. You can't beat it. So before I forget, I need to get the polarity figured out on this welder before I even put wire in, otherwise I'll forget about it. So I'm gonna wait on the wire for a couple minutes. Underneath of this cover, there's a little bit of information about polarity. Kind of talks about like different material, wire type, you know, whether or not it uses shielding gas. You got polarity, wire size, you know, anyway. Right here is the only option for flux cord wire. And obviously it says no shielding gas, and then the polarity setting is DCEN. Now on Harbor Freight's website, you can look at any manual for anything that they sell, and I'm assuming that Harbor Freight's lawyers make them do that. So then if you buy something like this, where I bought this as an as-is item, not brand new, so I didn't get paperwork with this, but they offer it online, I'm assuming, because if you hurt yourself or ruin something because of your lack of knowledge, then they're gonna, you know, say, well, you didn't look at the manual, so that's why he made a mistake. So I found the manual for this welder, and DCN, I just learned this today. I've been welding for a long time, but I'm not very technical with it. I learned that DCEN stands for direct current electrode negative. And so that kind of setup is not where the polarity is set up on this right now. So I'm glad I checked that, because if I would have tried welding with flux cord wire, I probably, you know, could have hurt the machine. So in order to fix this, I got two cords coming out of this. This one right here is the ground, and then this other wire here goes around inside the machine, and that goes to the MIG gun. So right now it's set up as DCEP, which is direct current electrode positive. So that would be set up for welding with gas. But anyway, I gotta switch this wire out and put this one in its place. So basically the wire for the MIG gun is gonna go in the negative slot, and then the ground cable is gonna go in the positive slot. And on this machine, it's obviously incredibly easy to change these out. You got this little cam lock on there, which is pretty much what all my other welders ever had on them. Older welders, or certain brands, don't use these, but okay, there's one. Okay, got a lot of cords going on here. So like I said, this is the cord for the ground. That is in the positive. And then the cord that goes to the MIG gun is in the negative. If you run a spool gun, they have it labeled here. So if you flip this switch up, that's where you would have that if you were using a spool gun and you were welding aluminum. Obviously, since I'm only going to use MIG, you obviously press the switch down, and it says MIG/flux. So you pretty much don't have to touch this unless you go to use a spool gun, which I don't do that. I believe that is really all I had to do to get this thing prepared for flux core. I like how long that hose is. That's a lot longer than the flux core hoses on my other ones. Just for purposes of feeding wire through this thing, and getting it ready to weld, I'm gonna be using an extension cord. But when I actually weld with this, I'm gonna be moving it towards the other end of the garage so I can plug this machine directly into the wall. I hate using extension cords. I feel like I have decreased performance and a better probability of blowing a breaker, so I don't like welding with extension cords. In this case, I'm using a 2-pound spool, so the diameter of this spool is small, and that fits over this piece. But if you get a, like, I don't know how many pounds they are, like a 5 or 10 pound spool, which I think is probably the maximum that you could put in here because of its size, then you would actually loosen this, and that larger spool would go on this, and then you would thread this back on. And for whatever reason, this is reverse thread, which, whatever. But for this test, and for now, I'm only going to be using Flux core, so this is how I need to run it. Okay, let's see. Loosen this up. Grab a halfway decent set of needle nose for this next part. Now, in case you've never seen any of my welding videos, anytime I record myself putting new wire in one of these machines, I always make sure to tell everybody that these spools are under tension, and if you don't use a tool like needle nose or some pliers or even MIG pliers, you can actually have this whole spool unravel and ruin the whole spool because it's next to impossible to try to wind it back up. And yeah, it's not good. So got to make sure to hold on to it properly. Now in this case, there's a picture here. Hopefully you can see. It obviously tells you that you want the wire on the bottom side of the spool heading in to where the wire goes, and that's kind of a given, but you can always look at that stuff if you need a confirmation. I'm gonna have to cut this since it's bent. Now it's not under so much tension that it's gonna like throw your hand off of it and you won't be able to hold it. I'm just saying you gotta hold on to it, you can't let it go. So put this thing in there, put this on there, see? It wants to unspool. Feed that through. This right here, hopefully you can see it, is the drive wheel that actually makes the wire move. So you got to make sure it's making contact with that. And you're not going to be able to see this, not only because of the lack of light, but because my GoPro can't film very good at close proximity. But you got to thread this thing into this little hole and go a fair distance, I guess, if you want. Like I said, I can't really show you, but this wire is in that little groove on this drive wheel. So this here is just kind of an idler. Just turns on its own. It's not driven by anything. Put that back down right on top of your wire. Put this thing back up and tighten it down. Now obviously you want to tighten it down enough that your wire's not going to be loose. And I guess I've never really over tightened this before, or even under tightened, so I don't really know how tight you're supposed to get it. Now, I remember how this went on there. This is a keyed shaft right here, so these washers have little nubs on them. And I think that kind of keeps the spool from unwinding itself while it's in there, so you want to make sure you use this stuff. Now, I don't know, obviously the little motor here is going to pull the wire. I don't know if you can tighten these so much that that won't work, so if it doesn't move, I'll probably try loosening this. But we can actually flip it on. So this nozzle here This nozzle is the same nozzle that goes on pretty much all of my current flux core only welders. It's the slip-on type, not the kind that threads, and I think that's good news, because that means Harbor Freight carries the nozzles for these, and these get burned up sometimes. I mean, things happen to these. You get splatter on it, whatever. Over time they wear down, so it's really nice that Harbor Freight carries these. And if I buy a whole bunch of them, which I did, I have like 10 of these probably by now, they fit on all my flux core welders, so that's excellent. Buying stuff from Harbor Freight as opposed to online or, you know, somewhere else. Gotta loosen up this, it's already loose. Gotta loosen up this tip here. Can't leave this on there because you'll have a heck of a time trying to get the wire to go through this. There we go. I try to have my hose as straight as possible when I'm feeding new wire. I think it just makes it easier. It's moving, but very slowly. I might have this too tight. I have this thing way too tight. So that's my bad. Also, I forget, this does have manual wire speed. So for this instance, you can turn the wire speed up all the way if you want to speed up the process. Okay, there it is. Use one of these. Stick this thing on there. Cinch this down just a little bit. It doesn't have to be super tight, you just don't want it to fall off. In this diffuser, I guess you could say, right here, this is reverse thread, so if you over tighten your contact tip, you're actually going to start unthreading your diffuser, if that makes sense. So that's why you don't want to over tighten your contact tip, because then you'll have issues with your diffuser. Easy slip on nozzle. That's pretty much it. So this thing here, I need to keep track of where this is at, so if I ever get a larger spool, I have this. I could probably just leave it in here, just as long as you don't let it roll into your wire or obstruct anything in here. It is set to Flux MIG. Alright, so while I was reading up in the manual on what to do with this inductance knob, which I still don't have the answer to that yet, I'm still reading it, but I did find out that this button right here, what this does, it has one setting is 2T, the other setting is 4T, and these are basically like modes for the trigger on the MIG gun. So I'm basically always going to use this machine in 2T, which is the top option. What that means is when you depress the trigger, welding starts, and when you release it, welding stops. That's every machine I've pretty much ever welded on or welded with. That's always how I did it. The bottom option though is kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like cruise control for your welder. According to this, you squeeze the trigger to start welding, and then you release the trigger during welding, and you continue welding. It'll stay on, and then you squeeze and release the trigger to shut the welding off. So you're actually like welding without your finger actually depressing the trigger, if that makes sense, which I don't need to weld that way. I wouldn't be comfortable welding that way anyway. And then I don't have good enough electric in this garage to be welding that continuously, that I need cruise control on my welder. So that's what that means. I'm always going to have this on 2T. That's how I like to weld. Basically what I've been reading about is that the inductance controls the rise of current, I guess. So if you have too much of it, you can have issues. If you have too little of it, you can have issues. So just to combat that, I'm just gonna, it goes up to 10, same as the voltage here. It goes between 1 and 10. So I'm just gonna put it right at 5, which is 50%. I think everything's good to go. All right, move some things around and we'll try out a test piece. Might as well try this out. Bought it. There's diesel in that, but I don't know, it's closed off. I'm not really worried about it. And I threw my diesel and gas can way outside, so it's not anywhere near the welder. Honestly, it's not bad at all. Right now I'm at about 5 for wire speed, almost 5 for voltage, and then 5 for inductance. Alright, so I shut the camera off so I didn't record an hour of me changing settings on this thing. I've been trying all kinds of different stuff, trying kind of a process of elimination. Once I find something that's halfway decent, I'll move one at a time. See, like it's at 186 now, you know, I'll move it down or move it up. If it gets better or doesn't, put it right back where it was, which was 186. Same thing with voltage. You know, I'll try something new and whatever. So I had always kind of, some of the welders I used to use, typically the closer that the wire speed and the voltage were together, they kind of usually went along all right with each other. But if that doesn't work, you always, you know, adjust one or the other. But I got it pretty close. A lot of welders I used to use would always you'd always want the voltage a little bit higher than the wire speed. Basically, I'm just adjusting everything until I get that. I go by sound when I weld. I always can kind of find that point when you can hear that good buzzing sound, like a bzzz, not like a psh, 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 you know? And if you get the wire speed too high and the voltage too low, or the voltage too high and the wire speed too low, you know, you either don't have enough power to get the weld hot enough, or you have enough power but you don't have enough wire, so your wire shorts out. You run out of wire before you get more wire out, if that makes sense. I know that's goofy. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not a professional welder. I don't know a lot about this stuff. I've kind of been playing around with it long enough though that I get to figure out things, and I kind of get in a groove with both the welder and my own technique where things start working. Honestly, you know, I'm still working on the settings, but this is a really good welder. Anyway, I'm gonna keep messing with the settings. If I find a good spot, I'll show it to you. Okay, so off camera, I was messing around with the settings on this thing. Finally, I decided just to look at the little sticker they have under the door here. Flux cord 030 1/8" steel. It gives you 3 numbers. Hopefully you can see that: 250, 18, and 5 to 10. So the 250 is wire speed, the 18 is voltage, and then the 5 to 10 is the inductance. So I had started at 5 and welded with it, and it welded great. So I moved it up to 7 to see if it would make any difference in the weld, which I really didn't notice much, but I did trip the breaker. So I don't know if your inductance setting has a lot to do with whether or not you strain your electric. I have no idea, but this thing does have a 30% duty cycle at a certain, you know, power output or whatever, and I was welding for a while, and so maybe the machine itself just needed time to cool and rest or whatever. But as you can see, I put a heck of a lot of weld on these scrap pieces of metal. And one thing I noticed about this machine compared to my other flux core only machines, my flux core only machines would take forever to build up that much weld because they lay down very little material, you know, a little bit of wire, and they don't have as much power or speed, you know. So it takes forever to put weld down with my other flux core machines. Now this machine, even though I am running flux core wire and I have the machine set up for flux core, it has a lot more heat and it can feed out a lot more wire, which means you can really fill in an area with weld a lot faster than you could with my other machines. Now I'm sure since this machine is bigger and it has larger electronic components and everything in it, I'm sure that it welds hotter a lot easier than my other machines. Meaning, you know, at 18 volts right now, that's only 60% of its power capacity, you know, using a 110 volt outlet. And it's very hot. It's extremely hot. And I have the wire speed almost maxed out. It's at about 8.5 right now, or 250 on the gauge there, the digital readout. So I think that having a bigger machine kind of helps you out if you have issues with tripping the breaker. Now, I have an Art Captain, a MIG145 Pro that was tripping the breaker a lot, and that had to run pretty much its maximum power output, and I was running into the basement and resetting the breaker a lot. I've only had to do that once with this machine, and like I said earlier, I think it was because I was welding for too long and the machine was just hot, so it tripped it. But a couple days have passed since the last clip you saw, so this thing's cool. I haven't welded with it yet. I just kind of wanted to show these settings. I'm going to move the inductance back down to 5 because that is working pretty well. I was also thinking if I'm welding material that's less than 1/8, so maybe like 14 gauge, you know, it gives you those readouts, 135, 16, 5 through 10. So I want to try that. Even though this is not 14 gauge steel, I just want to try a lower setting. 135, 16. I love this digital readout. That's really nice. 135, 16. It's so smooth too. 135, 16, and then 5 through 10. Like I said, I'm gonna have the inductance right at or maybe right above 5, just so then I'm, you know, at least within the operating range for that. So I'm gonna try this, see what it does. Definitely a huge difference there. Going from 250 down to 135, almost dropping, you know, what is that? 115 for wire speed. So, you know, less than half of kind of what it was at. And then voltage, not too much of a difference from 18 to 16. I'm gonna move this thing up to 17, and I'm gonna see what that does. When your piece that you're welding gets really hot, you get different results from the same settings. Because right now this piece is cold, but I guarantee you if I weld on this for a while and get this whole piece nice and hot, it'll probably weld better on lower settings, if that makes any sense. This entire chunk here was almost orange. That's how hot I had it. So on lower settings, it was doing really well because it didn't have to bring, the weld didn't have to bring the heat up that much. If that makes any sense. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's go back to like where I was at earlier, which was what? 250/18. Usually when I'm welding, I feel like I have the machine set right when I get a really good buzzing sound. It just sounds nice. It's not like fluttering or sputtering or anything. It's just like a bzzz. So I'm gonna try that again and see kind of what noise we can get out of this thing. Oh, that's hot, wow. So that there didn't sound as good as it did the other day when I first tried that setting. And I think, like I said, I think that's because this piece is cold. So I wonder if that has anything to do with the inductance. I'm going to turn the inductance up to 6. Doesn't sound any better. Turn it up to 7, see if it makes a difference. Bring it back down to 5. I'm going to turn the... I read somewhere on a YouTube comment a long time ago, and I'll never forget it. A guy who was really good welder made a comment about titanium welders, and he said always run a little bit more voltage than it tells you. He said they run a little bit cold. I'll never forget that. So maybe I'll turn it up 18.5. Keep this at 250. Didn't mean to move that. 18.5. Let's try that. See if that sputtering noise goes away. Not bad. Let's try 260 for wire speed. Blew the breaker. Told ya. Alright, well, I reset the breaker. Oh yeah, I always shut these off before I reset the breaker. I don't think it can be very good on these welders to be, you know, getting shut off that way. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, we got some crazy weather moving in here, so probably should start getting things put away. But yeah, I'm really happy with this titanium welder. It's definitely a good addition to my fleet of welders. I don't know what that really means for my other welders, which my MIG140 and even the titanium 125 I just got are pretty cool, so I'll probably hold on to them. But if this welder kind of yields better results than everything else, then I'm gonna probably stick with this. I'm really looking forward to trying out normal MIG with gas and everything. I just didn't want to invest in a bottle or any gas yet. I wanted to make sure this thing actually welded, because even though it didn't look bad out, you know, when I bought it, you never know, a guy could have returned it because it didn't work. But I think it seemed fine to me. So this thing definitely has a really cool gun on it compared to my other ones. Just seems more heavy duty, and it's like at least 10 foot long, if not longer. I could probably measure it, but I'm guessing it's about 10. So you can get farther away, you know, and weld whatever you want. You don't have to be so close to the machine. And that's good for me because I always plug my welders directly into the outlet. I don't use extension cords. So I can actually have the welder over here by the outlet, but then be welding something somewhere else, you know, with the long MIG gun. You know what I just noticed? I don't know if anyone noticed this already in my video. This is how stupid I am. I left the ground on top of the bench instead of actually clamped to it. That's funny. I guess technically it welded okay, but that's kind of funny. It actually welded the clamp onto the table because the connection was bad. I'm an idiot. I always appreciate everybody watching my videos, but don't ever come to me for advice or tips on anything. I do things wrong so much. But anyway, yeah, so this is a sweet welder. If you ever find one on sale, I'd definitely get one. So, especially in the as-is section if you're lucky. The way they have that Harbor Freight tool rental program where people buy something, use it once and return it, no questions asked. You know, if there's any reason they can't put it back on the shelf, they'll put it in the as-is or the clearance section. You can save some money and have a machine that was only used once or whatever. So, all right, well, stay tuned for more on this machine, and thanks for watching.